But anyway, I just wanted to go ahead and welcome everyone for showing up to our lecture on Respondus. Today we're going to talk about the faculty tools with Respondus LockDown Browser and Respondus Monitor. So basically what we're planning on covering today is we're going to talk about what Respondus LockDown Browser is, what Respondus Monitor is, how we're going to access these tools in Blackboard and select the exams, and what we're going to do after the students take the exams, and what you can plan on telling your students if you are using or planning to use this semester or in future semesters. So basically, what is LockDown Browser? LockDown Browser is a custom browser that locks down the testing environment in Blackboard Learn. When students use LockDown Browser to take a Blackboard test, they're unable to print, copy, or go to other websites, access other applications, or close a test until it's submitted for grading. Tests that are created for use with LockDown Browser cannot be accessed with standard browsers. LockDown Browser functions much like a standard browser, but some options have been removed or work differently, and we'll go over what these differences are. The first feature of LockDown Browser is the modified toolbar, where students can basically only access the forward, back, refresh, and stop functions, and it does not include other functions that are in the normal tool browser that you would see on the top of your web page. The second feature is what they call test mode, where tests are only shown in full screen and cannot be minimized, resized, or exited until they're submitted to Blackboard for grading. The next feature is the disabled controls, where all the printing, keystroke combinations, screen grab function keys, and the right-click menus on the mouse have been disabled while students are within LockDown Browser. The next element is the blocked features and applications, where for Windows users, the start button's been removed, along with the system tray menu bars being removed for all their users. The final feature is the web links feature. If enabled, it'll allow the student to be directed to another website, and it will open in a secure window and prevent browsing from beyond that page. In other words, if you have an item within your Blackboard test that requires students to go to a YouTube video, which is an external site, to view that content and answer a question on the content, if you enable the feature, it will allow them to go to that site and that site only. So basically, something that we need to note is that if you have a quiz or exam that is housed inside of a publisher resource, such as Pearson, Cengage, or McGraw-Hill Connect, that LockDown Browser will not work in that environment. Respondus will only work for exams that are housed within Blackboard. So what is Respondus Monitor? Respondus Monitor uses the webcam feature in conjunction with LockDown Browser that records students online for non-proctored exams. When this feature is enabled for a test, students are required to use a webcam and a microphone with LockDown Browser. After the exam is complete, the instructor can review details of the assessment and even the recorded videos. So, how are we going to review or access LockDown Browser in Blackboard? First thing you're going to do is log into Blackboard, find your course in your My Course section, scroll down to the course tools where you'll see LockDown Browser is available. And once you're there, you'll see the welcome site that includes many features that you'll find useful as an instructor if you choose to use LockDown Browser and Respondus Monitor. The first thing I suggest you do is to look at the video tutorials. It'll help increase your understanding and comfort level with LockDown Browser. In the Getting Started tab, of course, it suggests watching the videos. It also will include information that you want to put in your syllabus if you're going to use it for future semesters, or if you're going to use it for this semester, information to include in your email to students, letting them know that you plan on using LockDown Browser. And here's all the information that you'll need. I suggest scrolling through there as well. Something I did want to note is the practice quiz. In my opinion, the most important thing that you can do for your students if you're planning on using LockDown Browser or Respondus Monitor to create a practice quiz that use these tools prior to rolling it out on a graded exam. Just like we had to get all of our students familiar with how to use Zoom at the beginning of the semester, Creating the practice quiz will allow students to gain a comfort level with LockDown Browser in a low-stakes environment. The last feature on the dashboard is the resource tool. In the resource tool, you can access the instructor quick start guide, the student quick start guide, and there's even an opportunity for you to go to a free training webinar if you'd like to do so. So the next thing is, how do I select a test or exam for LockDown Browser? Well, from that welcome screen, if you click on Continue to LockDown Browser, you will go to the Respondus LockDown Browser dashboard, which will show all the tests or quizzes that can be chosen for LockDown Browser or Respondus Monitor. For example, if I wanted to go ahead and choose Quiz 2 for LockDown Browser, I would click on the chevron, I would click on the settings, and then I am given to the LockDown Browser settings screen. For this exam, I'm going to choose to go ahead and require LockDown Browser only, and I'm not going to require Respondus Monitor at this particular time. Something that I wanted to point out will affect those that choose to use a password for BlackBoard tests. What you will do is you will put that password here in the Respondus setting, and you will do that because in order for the integration between LockDown Browser and BlackBoard to work, LockDown Browser creates a special password for the exam that communicates with the LockDown Browser app. Going in and changing this password will cause LockDown Browser to not work for the exam that you wish to enable and have students use the program for. We're going to briefly go over the advanced settings that can be enabled for LockDown Browser. And of course, detailed explanations for all of these settings are there, and you can see those below. The first thing I wanted to do was talk about students taking it in iPad. We know that our students love to use BlackBoard on their Apple devices, and that our current version of BlackBoard doesn't exactly support the use within that app. So if you enable this setting, I suggest enabling it with caution. The good news is we did manage to test the use of LockDown Browser on an iPad, and it was successful. But I cautioned that our sample size was a sample size of 1. So if you do enable this, I strongly suggest that you use that sample quiz first and make sure that all the bugs are worked out. Remember as well that we talked about the external links to YouTube if it's required in your BlackBoard test. Here is where you would enable that particular website or link to YouTube. So again, special reminder, and something that's worth repeating in my opinion, is that if you are using LockDown Browser or Respondus Monitor, once you have set up your test or quiz for use with LockDown Browser or Respondus Monitor, you cannot change the name of your test or the password, otherwise the program will not work. So basically now that the students have taken an exam in LockDown Browser, what do we need to do next? First thing you'll do is you'll navigate back to the Respondus LockDown Browser dashboard, and you'll notice that any alerts or flags that show up will show up with a yellow circle under the chevron. In order to view those, you'll want to go ahead and click the chevron beside the quiz, click on Review Early Exits, and it'll show you the alert and the reason why the student gave is why they exited LockDown Browser prior to completing the exam. And of course, one thing that you need to know is that when a student is in LockDown Browser, it will ask them at least 2 times if they are sure they want to exit before they submit the test. And it makes them type a reason why they want to leave early if they haven't submitted the test yet. Notice this particular student said because the test was too hard. Any questions before we move on to Respondus Monitor?
So do we have to create a password for the exam, or is it just if you create a password, you can't change it?
It's only if you create a password. I know sometimes in accounting and certain people, they'll put in, like say, quiz 1, or they'll put in the name of their dog or something like that. Where that password normally goes in, and let me go back to that slide deck. You know how in BlackBoard, you can choose, display your test after, display your test until, and then that's where you would normally put your password in for a BlackBoard exam.
Mm-hmm.
If you're using LockDown Browser, it automatically populates where that password would go. So if you choose to use a password for your exam, you will put it in the LockDown Browser settings on how to access that password. And when you get into LockDown Browser, it will have you put in the password there. So basically what you're doing is you're putting the password within LockDown Browser for your students to access that exam. So,
Okay,
but yeah, that's how that works.
thanks.
No problem. And of course, the next thing we're going to talk about is how to set up a test or exam using Respondus Monitor, which is the webcam feature of Respondus. Again, you'll log into BlackBoard, find your course, go to the left navigation bar, course tools, and go to Respondus LockDown Browser, where you'll again be navigated to your Respondus LockDown Browser dashboard. To set up a test in Respondus Monitor, you'll need to go ahead and click the chevron beside the quiz that you want. Click on Settings, and then you'll go ahead, require Respondus LockDown Browser for this exam. And this time, in the monitor webcam settings, you're going to go ahead and require Respondus Monitor for the exam. Once you do that, the startup sequence will open up, or the box will at least, showing you all the options. And you'll notice that they are in the same order that Respondus will give to the students to verify their webcam and their identity. You can preview or edit the text directions in the additional instructions or the environmental check categories. And if you want to change the text that students are shown for the directions, you're free to do so in those two areas. Something to note that if you want to play around and do the webcam check preview or the facial detection check preview, that you'll need to be in Google Chrome and not Firefox or Internet Explorer. The reason why these are grayed out on my screenshot is because I happen to be in Firefox at the time, and those two things were disabled when I was in that particular web browser. So the next thing we need to look at is how a student, once they've taken the exam, how we can access information about that exam session to review the recorded videos for irregularities. Again, we direct ourselves to the Respondus LockDown Browser dashboard. We go to the particular quiz that required the lockdown. We go to class results, and the roster of students enrolled in your course will be shown with the date that they took the exam. The review priority, which is what Respondus assigns to something you may want to look at more in detail with errors and different things of that nature, which we'll go over later, as well as their grade on the exam. So once you click on the plus symbol for Jane Adler here, for example, we can take a look at her exam session details. We notice that in the first section here, we have the summary of key details. We also have a list of all the flags and milestones that the student had for this particular exam. Over here in this section, we've got the video playback controls where you can go ahead and play, skip ahead, skip back. We have the timeline, which will show the flags in red and the milestones in blue. And of course, the thumbnail images where the student, took the photo, took her ID. If you choose to do an environment photo where they take and go around their test area to see that there's no other notebooks, phones, etc., you can view all that from this particular area in the dashboard. Something to note is that videos can take up to 12 hours to be processed by Respondus before the full report is available to review. So it's something that if a student immediately emails you when they're done, you're not going to be able to view it for a while. Just tell them to be patient, and then you'll go in and take a look at it when Respondus gives you the information. Any questions before I go into what you should share with your students?
I don't think so. I think I'm good.
All right. Thank you, Alicia. All righty. So basically, in a nutshell, if I plan on using LockDown Browser or Respondus Monitor, what do I need to tell my students? First thing you should tell your students is to go ahead and send them the Student Quick Start Guide for LockDown Browser and Respondus Monitor. This can be found back in that welcome screen under Resources, and give them the link to the Student Quick Start Guide, or you can download the PDF and email them the PDF yourself. Second thing you should do is, of course, send the students a link to view the video introduction and the link download Respondus LockDown Browser desktop app for their PC. Where you can find that link is also back in that welcome screen in the LockDown Browser dashboard in the Getting Started, and that download link is right there on the bottom. Once the students utilize that link, direct them to the video that they can watch, the overview video, and then go ahead and have them install the specific lockdown browser app for WVUP site. And of course, something that you'll want to stress to your students is to make sure that they only download the app from this site. If your students go to another site, then they may not be able to take your Blackboard exam because they may not be directed to the Blackboard Learn website if they download the Respondus app from another site or another school site. So that's something important to note. So the third thing, and in my opinion, the most important thing that you can do for your students is to create and deploy a practice quiz, either using LockDown Browser or Respondus Monitor, so that your students can get used to the program in a low stakes environment. And of course, any bugs or issues can be taken care of prior to the time that they would take a midterm or a final exam. So what else you can tell your students? If you're going to decide to use LockDown Browser or Respondus Monitor, let your students know that we will be having a Zoom session specifically for students on Monday, September 28th at 2 p.m. And let them know that they should have received an email yesterday, which is Thursday, with the Zoom meeting link. And if you're planning on using a class with Respondus LockDown Browser, or excuse me, if you're planning on using a test with Respondus LockDown Browser or Respondus Monitor, then you should highly encourage your students to attend this lecture. So any questions at all?
I don't think so. I may have some that when I go to set it up, but right now I think I'm good.
Alrighty, if you do, obviously, you can email Chris or I. Actually, go ahead and email me at jfox8@wvup.edu, and we can answer those for you. Because I'm sure once you get in there and get your hands dirty in the program, that you will, you'll have some questions. So.
Okay. Yeah. So, but it seems like fairly straightforward. Set up the quiz as normal, and then go into the browser for LockDown or Respondus Monitor to add that to the exam, right? Yeah.
You got it. Yeah. And the quick start guides will give you great detail in terms of, how to get in there and do that. So.
Okay.
Not a problem.
Well, thank you, Jonah.
Not a problem. You've been a wonderful audience.
Well, thank you. You've been a wonderful presenter. Sorry you have an audience of one today, but
no worries. No
Thanks,
worries.
Alicia.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Hey, let's go ahead and stop the recording.
Yeah.